It has been more than 3 years since little Summer Wells vanished from her home in Rogersville, Tennessee. And in that time, there has been one constant voice the public has clung to, the voice of law enforcement. From the very beginning, the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, along with the Hawkins County Sheriff's Office, have stood in front of cameras, chosen their words carefully, and spoken directly to a community desperate for answers. But here's the problem. Their words don't add up. On one hand, police have said this case is outside the norm. They've admitted that there are no signs of an abduction, no footprints, no trail to follow. Yet in the same breath, they say that every possibility is still on the table, that she could have been taken, that she could have wandered off, or that foul play could have occurred inside the home itself. So which is it? When law enforcement gives conflicting statements, the public is left not with clarity, but with confusion. Parents begin to doubt, neighbors turn on each other, and the entire community starts to wonder if the police know more than they're willing to admit. Tonight on Detective Max, we're going to take a hard look at what the police have actually said about Summer Wells. Every press conference, every carefully worded statement, every phrase that seems harmless on the surface, but may reveal more than it intends. Because when a child disappears without a trace, words are all we have. And sometimes, it's not just the words spoken, but the silences in between that matter most. So let me ask you, have the police been transparent in their search for Summer Wells, or are they protecting information the public deserves to know? If hearing this makes you uncomfortable, good it should. Because babies don't just disappear, lies do. But before we dive into this, kindly subscribe to our channel if you believe in fighting for justice. We've just crossed 4,000 subscribers, all because of your support, and we need that same energy to reach 5,000, then 6,000, and then 10,000. So go ahead and drop your fingerprints on that subscribe button and where you watching from, because wherever you are, the day this vision is fulfilled, I will send my appreciation straight to you. Let's keep building this community that fights for justice together. When police say they have no evidence, yet refuse to rule anything out, how much short of truth are we being told? From day one, investigators in the Summer Wells case have stood before cameras with two messages. On one hand, they admit there is no physical evidence, no signs of a struggle, no confirmed footprints, no trace of Summer leaving that hill. And yet, in the very next sentence, they tell us nothing can be ruled out. That contradiction leaves us asking, how can both be true? If there is no evidence, then why keep the possibility of abduction alive? Why maintain that she could have simply wandered away into the woods when searches by ground, air, and water turned up nothing? Why publicly float every theory, but confirm none? This is not just a question of strategy, it's a question of trust. Because every word law enforcement speaks shapes how the public responds, whether they keep searching, whether they keep hoping, or whether they start doubting. In this episode of Detective Max, we're going to dig into the core of that contradiction. We'll examine how the police language has shifted over time, what might be behind their refusal to commit to one explanation, and whether these mixed messages are a sign of caution or of something far more concerning. Because in true crime, silence speaks. And sometimes, the loudest silence comes from those sworn to protect. To understand the contradictions in police statements, we need to revisit what happened the day Summer Wells disappeared. It was June 15, 2021, when the call came in from Hawkins County, Tennessee. A 5-year-old girl, blonde hair cropped short, barefoot, and dressed in pink, was suddenly missing from her rural home in the Beach Creek community. Her mother, Candace Bly, told investigators that Summer had been gardening with her that afternoon, then went inside the house. Minutes later, Candace said, "Summer vanished without a trace." The call triggered an immediate response. The Tennessee Bureau of Investigation issued an Amber Alert within hours, a step reserved only for the most urgent and credible cases of abduction. Within 24 hours, helicopters circled above the property, K-9 units combed the thick Appalachian woods, and dive teams scoured creeks and ponds. For days, hundreds of volunteers and professionals flooded the holler. Searchers described the terrain as brutal, dense forest, steep ridges, and snake-infested underbrush. Despite that, the coverage was extensive. Crews pushed mile after mile into every possible direction. Yet no trail of Summer was ever found. And that's what makes this case so chilling. The absence of evidence, no discarded clothing, no footprints leaving the property, no broken branches suggesting she ran off into the trees. It was as if she simply evaporated. From the very first days, investigators told the public two things: that nothing indicated foul play, and that every possibility remained on the table. They could not say she was abducted. They could not say she wandered away. And in the absence of clarity, the Wells family, the community, and the world at large were left in a fog of uncertainty. That fog has lasted over 3 years, and it is in that fog that contradictions grow. Every missing child case is by nature complex. But in Summer Wells' case, it isn't just the lack of answers that makes it so haunting. It's the words chosen by law enforcement themselves. The vocabulary. The phrasing. Because words are never neutral in a case like this. They either build trust, or they build distance. Let's start with that chilling phrase, outside of the norm. It's subtle, almost forgettable at first. But if you listen closely, it reveals something significant. For seasoned investigators, the disappearance of a 5-year-old is tragically familiar territory. They know the patterns: a child who wandered too far, a relative who panicked and concealed the truth, a predator who struck quickly. These are the norms of their work. So when the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation said Summer's case was outside of the norm, what they were really saying was, this doesn't fit anything we've seen before. That is not a statement made lightly. It was, in its own way, a coded warning to the public: prepare yourself, because this case will not play by the usual rules. Then came the repeated insistence on no evidence. No evidence of abduction. No evidence she simply wandered away. No evidence pointing in either direction. But here's the problem. When authorities declare no evidence, what they are often signaling is something much more complex. They may have information, they may have suspicions, behaviors, statements, or digital traces. But evidence in the legal sense means something provable in court. Something that can stand under cross-examination. So by repeating the phrase, no evidence, they weren't saying they had nothing. They were saying they had nothing they were prepared to share. Or nothing that could yet hold weight in a courtroom. And then we come to the phrase that may be the most telling of all possibilities explored. It sounds thorough, it sounds committed. But dig deeper, and it becomes a paradox. Because if all possibilities remain open, then what progress has truly been made? In criminal investigation, narrowing down is the goal, eliminating false leads until only the truth remains. By saying every possibility is still on the table, investigators were signaling that they had not been able, or willing, to eliminate anything. In other words, after months of searching, questioning, and surveillance, they were stuck in the same fog as the day Summer vanished. Put these phrases together, and you begin to see a carefully constructed narrative. This case is different. We can't confirm anything. Every theory is still alive. It sounds responsible, but it also keeps the public, and perhaps even the family, in a perpetual state of limbo. Hope never fully dies. Suspicion never fully lands. And accountability, it floats endlessly, just out of reach. So the question becomes, are these phrases simply the careful caution of law enforcement? Or are they a way of concealing just how little has truly been uncovered? And more haunting still, what truths might be sitting behind the words they've chosen not to say? If words from law enforcement left us puzzled, then their actions in the search for Summer Wells only deepen the mystery. Because make no mistake, this was not a casual effort. From the very beginning, the search for Summer was described as one of the most intense and resource-heavy operations in Tennessee history. Ground teams combed the rugged hillsides surrounding the Wells property. Hundreds of trained personnel, deputies, volunteers, tactical units, scoured steep terrain that locals described as nearly impossible to navigate. These weren't just casual sweeps. They were grid searches, Coordinated, methodical, the kind of work where every step is documented, every angle covered. Specialized K9 units were deployed, trained to pick up even the faintest human scent. Dogs that had tracked everything from fugitives to missing hikers. Dogs with records of success in countless cases. Yet here their signals were inconsistent. Reports filtered out that the dogs picked up a trail near the house, but then it abruptly stopped. For some, that suggested a vehicle. For others, it meant contamination. But either way, it was one more thread that unraveled without closure. The search went high-tech as well. Drones equipped with thermal imaging swept across valleys and ridges, looking for heat signatures that could indicate a hiding child, or sadly, a body. Helicopters hovered overhead, their infrared cameras piercing through darkness. Even ground-penetrating radar was rumored to have been used in select areas. Nothing. And yet, for all this technology, for all this manpower, law enforcement admitted something chilling. Despite the breadth of their operation, there remained areas that could not be fully searched. Dense undergrowth, mine shafts, abandoned outbuildings, places where even the most advanced tools couldn't penetrate fully. So we have to ask, how can a child vanish so completely, even under such a massive dragnet? If she wandered, there should have been a trace. If she was taken, why did no clue appear on road cameras, thermal drones, or property sweeps? The search was both exhaustive and exhausting. But in the end, it raised more questions than it answered. Did the sheer size of the operation create the illusion of progress while missing the one place that mattered? Did investigators focus too heavily on certain theories, at the cost of others? Or is the truth more sinister, that Summer was removed from that environment so swiftly and cleanly, that no search, no matter how thorough, could have found her? What we are left with is a haunting paradox, one of the largest child searches ever conducted, and yet no footprint, no article of clothing, no trace. As though Summer simply dissolved into the air around her. After days of search efforts and countless press briefings, one statement from the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation cut through the noise. They admitted they could not determine whether Summer walked away from home or was taken by someone. Now pause on that. Because in true crime investigations, narrowing down the timeline and scenario is everything. The first 48 hours are not just a cliché, they are the window in which law enforcement typically locks onto a probable path. But here weeks turned into months, and the TBI maintained two completely opposite possibilities. On one hand, if Summer walked away, the case leans toward a tragic accident, a child lost in the unforgiving Tennessee hills. And yet, after one of the most extensive ground searches in the state's history, not even a shred of clothing or bone was found. That fact alone chips away at the wandering child theory. On the other hand, if she was abducted, the evidence should have pointed outward. Vehicle sightings, suspicious persons, neighbor reports. Something, but investigators revealed no concrete leads, only vague language about all possibilities. So why hold on to both scenarios for so long? Was it caution, refusing to eliminate a possibility until there was absolute certainty? Or was it confusion, the reality that the timeline and witness accounts were so fragmented, so uncertain, that no single theory could be ruled stronger than the other? Let's remember timelines anchor investigations. Who saw Summer last? What exact time was she reported missing? What did neighbors notice in those crucial minutes? If investigators cannot stitch those details into a coherent sequence, the case remains fogged in ambiguity. And ambiguity, in a high-profile case like this, is both a shield and a curse. Because by saying we can't rule out either, the TBI both protects themselves from locking in too early, and simultaneously admits that their evidence base is so thin, so fractured, that they are standing on shifting ground. In many ways, this duality tells us as much about the system's struggle as it does about Summer's disappearance. It's not just a mystery of what happened, it's a mystery of why nothing can be pinned down at all. In the weeks following Summer Wells' disappearance, law enforcement used phrases that sounded technical, reassuring, even definitive. Phrases like, "We're following up on vehicles in the area," or we're pursuing technology leads. But what do those phrases really mean? And more importantly, what do they obscure? Let's start with vehicles in the area. When investigators say this, it's often a catch-all for two possibilities: either eyewitness accounts of cars or trucks spotted near the Wells property, or digital data tied to vehicles, such as license plate readers, traffic cameras, or surveillance footage. On the surface, it tells the public, we're checking every angle, but dig deeper, and the cracks appear. Were these vehicles truly suspicious? Or were they simply locals passing through winding country roads? Roads where everyone knows everyone. Now consider the term technology leads. It sounds cutting edge. It sparks public confidence. It makes us believe there's a hidden layer of digital forensics, quietly unraveling the mystery. But in practice, it could mean something as basic as checking cell tower pings in the area, analyzing call logs, or pulling security footage from nearby properties. In rural Tennessee, where tech coverage is patchy and cameras are scarce, technology leads may not be as powerful as the words suggest. And here lies the deeper point. The framing of language shapes public perception. By saying, we're chasing vehicles and tech leads, investigators project progress without revealing specifics. It's a balancing act. Give too little, and the public feels shut out. Give too much, and you risk tipping off potential suspects or contaminating evidence. But there's another angle, one that raises uncomfortable questions. Could such carefully chosen language also serve as misdirection? Could emphasizing vehicles subtly nudge the public to look outward, toward strangers, outsiders, unknown threats, while avoiding the closer, more painful question of what might have happened inside Summer's home or family circle? This isn't about conspiracy, it's about strategy. Because in a case with no physical evidence, investigators are as much managing perception as they are managing leads. They're telling a community, we're working, we're watching, we're not blind. And yet the lack of clarity leaves families, neighbors, and the wider public filling in the blanks with speculation that only grows louder when official updates remain vague. In the end, phrases like vehicles in the area and technology leads may represent genuine effort, or they may represent an investigative stance that is deliberately cautious, deliberately incomplete, and deliberately frustrating. Either way, the power of words in this case cannot be overstated. Because when evidence is scarce, language becomes the evidence the public clings to. When investigators step up to a podium and speak, every syllable matters. In cases like Summer Wells, where the trail runs cold and evidence is scarce, words become the substitute for proof. But the same words that are meant to steady a shaken public can also fracture trust, sometimes beyond repair. Take the repeated line, "We have no evidence that an abduction occurred, but we have not ruled it out." On paper, this is the hallmark of caution. It keeps options open. It avoids the dangerous pitfall of prematurely labeling the case. But to many listening, it comes across as something very different, a contradiction. How can there be no evidence of abduction, and yet abduction is still on the table? That clash between logic and language plants seeds of doubt. For some, it creates confidence. They see restraint as professionalism, a sign that investigators refuse to box themselves into one theory. They hear caution and think, they're leaving no stone unturned, but for others, it sparks skepticism. They hear vagueness, hedging, and an almost bureaucratic tone that feels detached from the raw urgency of a missing 5-year-old. To them, the phrasing doesn't inspire confidence. It sounds like a smokescreen. And that skepticism doesn't stay quiet. It leaks into Facebook groups, YouTube comments, Reddit threads, and local gossip. Suddenly, theories multiply. If the police are so vague, then maybe, just maybe, they're hiding something. Maybe they know more than they're saying. Maybe they're protecting someone. Or maybe, worst of all, they've lost the trail entirely and are using caution as cover. This is how carefully worded statements, designed to preserve neutrality, can unintentionally canalize public pressure. They push ordinary people into investigative roles. They make armchair detectives comb over transcripts, count the seconds between pauses in press conferences, analyze every shift in tone. When official answers are thin, unofficial speculation grows thick. It becomes a cycle. The more vague the updates, the louder the theories. The louder the theories, the more cautious the police become in their language. And so public trust hangs in the balance, suspended between the official words that hold back too much, and the unofficial speculation that fills in too many blanks. In Summer's case, this tension, between confidence and skepticism, has shaped the very storyline of the investigation. To some, the TBI remains the steady hand in a storm. To others, they are part of the mystery itself, protectors of the truth, or gatekeepers of what the public was never meant to know. In the world of true crime, what the police say, and more importantly, what they don't say, rarely stays confined to a press conference podium. Every clipped phrase, every cautious remark, every refusal to commit, it doesn't end there. It echoes outward into a world where the media thrives on certainty, even when investigators refuse to give it. Take the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation's line, "We cannot confirm whether Summer walked away or was abducted." In the media's hands, this single sentence fractured into two competing headlines. One outlet ran with "Officials say Summer could have walked away." Another declared, "Authorities not ruling out abduction in Summer Wells' case." Both technically accurate, yet together they created opposite impressions of the same reality. This is the danger of strategic vagueness. It leaves room for media to craft narratives that may not align with the investigator's actual intentions. To the average viewer, scrolling social media, or catching a headline on the evening news, it can feel as though the story itself has split in two. Was she abducted? Did she wander off? Both. Neither. When clarity is absent, confusion takes root. And confusion is fertile soil for speculation. Once those mixed headlines hit YouTube channels, TikTok feeds, and Facebook groups, the phrasing morphs into something more sinister. Some read it as a sign the police are covering up corruption. Others insist it's proof the authorities are clueless and incompetent. The words that were meant to keep all options open suddenly fuel polarizing debates. Think of it as a game of telephone, except instead of whispers traveling down a line of children, it's headlines traveling across millions of screens. By the time the words reach the end of that chain, they no longer sound like cautious professionalism. They sound like contradiction, confusion, and concealment. The result? Media amplification doesn't just report the story, it reshapes it. It deepens divisions, magnifies suspicion, and pulls the case further into the court of public opinion, where facts matter less than perception. And in Summer's case, those perceptions have been powerful. They've turned neighbors into critics, strangers into investigators, and the Wells family into the centerpiece of an endless global discussion. Not because the police revealed too much, but because they revealed too little. So when you see a headline that seems shocking, remember it may not be the police revealing something new. It may just be the media stretching the silence into a story. On the surface, the public often imagines police investigations as simple: gather evidence, connect the dots, make an arrest. But in long-term missing person cases like Summer Wells, the reality is far more complex and far more draining. First, resources. In the early days of Summer's disappearance, the search effort was massive. Helicopters, drones, K-9 units, dive teams combing creeks, volunteers blanketing the woods. But as weeks turned to months, then years, the scale of that response inevitably dwindled. Departments don't have endless manpower or budgets. Leads dry up. New emergencies arise. For investigators still assigned to the case, this creates an impossible tension. How do you keep pushing forward with dwindling resources, while knowing the public expects the same urgency as day one? Then there's the challenge of community relations. Hawkins County isn't just any place. It's small, tightly woven, and full of eyes watching every move. Families who once trusted law enforcement may grow frustrated or resentful when answers don't come. Rumors spread that police are holding back, or worse, protecting someone. Each vague press statement can deepen that mistrust. Officers working the case must balance their legal obligation to keep evidence secure with the very human need of a community demanding transparency. It's a line that is almost impossible to walk without missteps. And hovering over it all are the legal constraints. Investigators can't simply act on hunches or public pressure. Every word at a press conference must be precise. One wrong phrase could compromise an eventual trial or taint a jury pool. Every action must withstand the scrutiny of defense attorneys years down the line. That means holding back information, even when the silence is interpreted by the public as incompetence, or worse, complicity. This is the quiet, often invisible burden of cases like Summers. Police are caught between the weight of expectation, the limits of their tools, and the laws that bind them. It creates a slow, grinding pressure, one that wears down not just families, but investigators themselves. And as the years pass, this pressure doesn't fade. It builds. Because with each passing day, the public demands, "Why don't you know more?" While the investigators wrestle with an even harsher truth. What if we've already missed it? Now let's pause here and shift the focus to you, the Detective Max community. We've listened carefully to the official statements from law enforcement, and while their words seem cautious, maybe even neutral, sometimes the tone, the pauses, even the body language, says more than the statement itself. I want you to go back and really study those press conferences. Pay attention to the exact wording. For example, when they say no evidence, Summer was abducted, but also we can't rule it out, does the shift in phrasing sound confident, or like they're hedging their bets? Look at the moments where officials avoid eye contact, glance down, or clear their throats. Those details may feel minor, but in communication, hesitation is rarely meaningless. So here's your assignment. Timestamp the moments in the comments below. Point out the phrases, the gestures, even the tone changes that made you raise an eyebrow. Did you catch something that sounded evasive? Or maybe something that gave you a flash of clarity about what they really meant? Your observations matter. This community has thousands of sharp eyes and ears. What one person misses, another will catch. And together we build a fuller picture than any single press release allows. So don't just watch, participate. Drop those timestamps. Share your thoughts. And if you think more people need to analyze this case as critically as we do here on Detective Max, the only place you'll find this kind of breakdown on YouTube. Make sure you hit that like button and share this video. The more voices we gather, the harder it becomes for this story to be forgotten. So here's where we stand. Police say they have no evidence, but refuse to rule anything out. They describe this case as outside the norm, yet provide no clear framework for what that really means. And while their words may sound neutral, their tone and timing hint at something deeper. But this is far from over. Because if the public statements leave us in the dark, the private documents, the incident reports, the investigative notes, the subtle leaks that surface weeks or even months later, may paint a very different picture. That's where we're headed next. In the upcoming Detective Max episode, we'll break down law enforcement reports and internal details that slipped into the public sphere. We'll line them up against the polished press conferences to ask one question: what are the police willing to say publicly, and what are they only admitting behind closed doors? If you thought today's careful phrasing raised red flags, just wait until you see the discrepancies we uncover between official messaging and internal communications. Because sometimes the truth isn't in what's said at the podium, it's in what's buried in the paperwork. So here's your call to action. Stay on Detective Max. This is the only place on YouTube where these breakdowns go beyond headlines and into hidden meaning. Subscribe now so you don't miss that upcoming episode. Share this video, because when more people analyze with us, more pressure mounts for answers. The case of Summer Wells is not fading. Not here, not on this channel. And as long as there are questions left unanswered, Detective Max will be asking them.